understand what's going on. Okay, in Revelation 17, we're doing 17 and 18 tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and read through Revelation 17, then we'll back up and talk about some of what we've read. Okay, Revelation 17, verse 1. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of those who and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk." And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written the name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly, but the angel said to me, "Why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beasts, and 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction, and the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. There are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen. 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not and is, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. Then the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority 1 hour together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. And the angel said to me, "The waters that you saw, where the prostitute is seated, are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked, and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. And the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth." Does anybody have any idea what that's talking about? That who is and was and will be? And well, I don't either. That's why I like commentaries, because you get a good insight. And I am going to read from some of them now. The first thing we see in chapter 17 is we're seeing another woman, which we've seen some before. But this is kind of the opposite of what we've seen before. She is a harlot arrayed with all kinds of earthly splendor. On her forehead, a name that identifies her is Babylon. Now, what do you think is the importance of Babylon? Was Babylon around now at this point in time? It was around, but it wasn't anything spectacular anymore. As we said before, there's a lot of symbolism in Revelation. And what do you think the New Babylon, or do you know what was called the New Babylon? That's right. Rome was considered the new Babylon. So as we read through that, the woman of chapter 12 will be identified in the New Jerusalem, the heavenly city. The woman carries an identity with Babylon. Chapter 17 is specifically going to tell us the judgment of the great harlot. This chapter will also show us what happened to Babylon. Okay, so verses 1 through 5. Okay, we see John is invited by an angel, one of the angels that had the 7 bowls. In opening verses, we're given material that assists in making clear identification of the woman. Yet this chapter is one of the most difficult. I mean, there's a lot of symbolism in here, so various points of identification from the text help us draw the conclusion that this woman is Rome. Now, Rome is a city, but we're talking about the Roman Empire, so that would be the beast that she rides. Because, as you know, if you know much of history, the Roman Empire was all over. They had spread far and wide. A lot of kings bowed down to the Roman Empire. The woman who is judged does not. Wait, I'm sorry. The various points of identification from text help us draw the conclusion to woman is city of Rome, the center of the empire, and the beast is the Roman Empire itself. The woman who is judged does not have the appearance of one who faces judgment. What did it say about the woman in this? How was she adorned? That's right. She had on the purple robe. She had on jewelry. She was all made up like she was going to a party somewhere. This is not a picture of somebody that you think is about to go through judgment. And some of the other things that it does refer to, let's see if I can find it here. Verse 9. This is more of showing you how the text shows the people of that time what they were looking at and why it points to Rome. This calls for a mind of wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. It was actually in a lot of literature besides the Bible. In poetry, a lot it was called the city of 7 hills. So that's one more thing pointing back to, okay, we're talking about Rome. And Rome did rule the earth in John's day. Yes? Right. Right. Rome was the most powerful city. As he said, it was their main hub of commerce. And in fact, through some of the other readings we're going to have going into chapter 18, we'll see more of that about the commerce and how that came into play. And let's see. Okay, one of the other things that we see is that it said that she sat on many waters. These waters are identified further on in verse 15 as the people and multitudes and nations and tongues. Like she covered the whole earth. It wasn't just the city of Rome. Wherever she stretched, she was, had multitudes of different types of people all around. That is to say, this is reference to the worldwide dominion and influence. Secondly, she's closely allied with the sea beast of chapter 13. She sits enthroned upon the beast and is carried by the beast. She's clothed in purple and scarlet and decked with all kinds of precious ornaments. This is a picture of the wealth and luxury of Rome. Rome is presented here as one who is decked out in all her fine dress in order to seduce men and to bring them into her immoral embrace. Now she has a golden cup filled with abominations. These words are used in the Old Testament to designate ceremonial or moral impurities especially rites and ceremonies. So once again, they're using words that they knew from Old Testament, from the scrolls that they would have read to them, or some of them would read. It's tying it all back into things that they know, so that they will understand. We're talking about Rome and all the things that, being the hub of power and great influence, comes with it. There's a lot of sin will come with that. Jeremiah spoke of ancient Babylon when he wrote, "Babylon has been a golden cup in the hand of the Lord, intoxicating all the earth. The nations have drunk of her wine, therefore the nations are mad." Once again, everybody was looking up to Rome and the Roman Empire for, this must be it. Y'all control everything, and everybody was following them. Another point, the woman has a name on her forehead: Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. Something through some other readings, you find that actually harlots of that day, especially in Rome, they would actually either put something on their foreheads, not like this, put like long story. They would have headbands or something written on them, identifying them as harlots. So, the woman is said to be drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. There's little doubt that this is a reference to the persecution of the Christians in the Roman Empire. We've been over that already before in here, about how the Roman Empire treated Christians. I mean, they went from being the ones that they listened to once Rome got the power and decided they don't want to have others being worshipped, then Christians became the martyrs, became what they used for entertainment in the Colosseums. They used them they dipped them in tar and used them as torches. So there's all different kinds of ways. They got pretty creative on how to kill Christians back then. But yes, Rome was drunk. She has seduced the kings of the earth to commit fornication with her. Fornication is mentioned frequently in the Old Testament. When God's people make alliances with those who are following other gods, they are said to be guilty of fornication or whoredom. Isaiah said that Tyre plays the harlot when she had no national relationship to God. That's in Nahum 3 and 4. They also they speak of Nineveh as a well-favored harlot. The real crime of Israel was their following after other gods and failing to call upon Jehovah God for their help. In fact, Israel itself is called an adulteress because God is her husband and she is playing the harlot. How is that? They made alliances with her, and that is what made them rich. Finally, she is said to have 7 mountains and to be the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. This could apply to no other city than Rome at this time. Once again, these aren't scholars that he's taking this to. He's wanting something that they all understand. So what would they understand but the references to Rome, the city, and the Roman Empire itself? In verses 6 through 11 of chapter 17. As he's wondering about the beast, he's instructed by the angel that he will be given an answer. And while the answer is given, it is not all apparent to just who or what is meant in this vision. The only clear part of the vision is that everything is closely connected with Rome itself. The woman sits on the beast, and the beast is filled with blasphemous names, which are insults to God, in verse 3. If the woman is Rome and she sits on the beast, it seems that the beast is Roman Empire. The blasphemous names are the references to the many gods of the empire. At that time, there were parts of Rome that they had certain gods that certain ones of them liked to follow, but then they also had areas that just whatever god you wanted to have there, follow it. So that's where the blasphemous part comes in. As far as the beast, which is the empire, they let all kinds of gods in there and pushed out Jehovah God almost totally at this point. Okay, this beast is described as having 7 heads and 10 horns. This is identical to what we read in chapter 13, verse 1. Only the order is changed up. It says having 10 horns and 7 heads. Same thing again. The 7 heads are said to be 2 things. It could either be the 7 heads or 7 hills. The identification of this with the city of Rome is usually acknowledged by everyone. And then the 7 heads are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen. 1 is, the other has yet to come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. Okay, now what are we talking about if it's that? Because it does say in there later on about the kings. 5 have fallen. Okay, one of the commentaries, what they refer to as 5 previous kings in Rome who no longer exist. The Roman Empire began with Augustus, then came Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero. These are the 5 who have fallen. After the death of Nero, there were 2 years of chaos, and you had some rulers, but they weren't really true Caesars like the others were. They kind of went in quick succession. They really didn't stand out as a true leader, and those aren't really considered. The one is, if this commentary was correct, this would be one called Vespasian. He's the first emperor to bring back stability to the empire, got everything out of chaos. And the successor of Vespasian, which was Titus. And if the one who has reference to Vespasian, that implies the book of Revelation was not written during Domitian's time. After Titus came Domitian. He was the last. But while he was on Patmos, there was a changing of the guards, so it's really not clear exactly when that happened. When his revelation would have been apparent to other people, written down and presented to others, Domitian would have been in power then. So that would have been the one that is to come. Now, the 7 horns. Okay, there is perhaps most puzzling part of the chapter. Who is the one who is an 8th? He is described as one, was and is not. Okay, let's read through that again. That's awful confusing. Let's see what verse it was. 12. Okay, verse 12. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Okay, there's a whole lot of is and is nots and all of that in there. And there are, once again, a couple of different ways people look at it. He's described as one who was and is not. Or number 2, one of the 7. Number 3 goes to the destruction. The one who is the 8th is Vespasian, and the one to rule for a short time as Titus, and it follows that the 8th is Domitian. Okay, we've gone over that. But this one is described as belonging to or equivalent to the 7. This is generally understood to mean that the emperor who followed Titus is identified with Nero, Nero was one of the most evil ones. And they're saying that Domitian followed Nero very closely in how he did things. He's evil incarnate. In him, the evil of the Roman Empire is consummated and epitomized. Little historical facts. The biographer of Domitian, his name was Suetonius, Roman historian. He painted a pretty grim picture of Domitian, and this is their historian. Early in his reign, he would remain secluded for hours, catching flies and tabbing them with a sharpened stylus. He formed homosexual attachments with a famous actor called Paris. He executed any historian who wrote anything he did not like. Senators were slaughtered left and right. After a civil war broke out in the provinces, Domitian became even more cruel. Suetonius writes, after his victory in the civil war, he became even more cruel, and to discover any conspirators who were in hiding, he tortured many of the opposite party by a new form of inquisition, which was inserting fire into their privates. And he cut off the hands of some of them. And he's the one, he started all of his official edicts. Our Lord and God bids this to be done. So at one point, he actually did think he was the Lord and God, which goes right along with why Rome and the Roman Empire are called prostitutes and a beast, because they went so far away from God. Okay, and soon that was the only way which he would even be addressed. He wouldn't even answer to anything but our Lord and God. It was Domitian who first made Caesar worship compulsory, who was responsible for unloosing the flood tides of persecution on the Christian church. Since Nero is not. Okay, there's your was and is not. Nero was considered a beast. Some of the other ones that came in between weren't too bad, really weren't all that bad on the Christians, but then comes Domitian, and he's terrible. He's worse than Nero ever thought of being. One of the commentaries says this represents the kingdoms that have ruled the world, and that John has been taken back in history to understand all of the godly kingdoms that have ever been an affront to God's people. And that's looking back at where it's talking about the 7 kings. This is somebody's opinion. This is a commentary that it's talking about kings that were there before. Now, the one that it's kind of hard not to agree with any of them, but the one that kind of makes sense to me is Haley's book on Revelation. Gives 3 different interpretations that have been handled by the commentaries and on the verses. Haley says the most popular view is that the angel had specific Roman emperors in mind, 5 of which were fallen. One was then on the throne, and the other was yet to come. However, there is no uniformity among those who hold this view as to where you begin numbering the emperors. So it's kind of, not everybody agrees that that's really the way it was meant to be interpreted. Okay, Haley says the best solution for the problem is to remember that the symbolic nature of the book is very prevalent. We have to remember that a lot of things that we read are symbolic. Repeatedly, John used 7 as a symbol for completeness or perfection, and 10 for the fullness of power. So the 7 churches in chapter 1 were not only congregations, they represented the church in its fullness. Same is said of the 7 spirits, the 7 lamps. When the book was read to the churches, the members would have thought of Rome as they were told of the harlot and of the empire. And when they heard the beast whom the harlot rode, the symbolism extends beyond this. The beast represents the total of forceful anti-Christian opposition that they had back then. And the harlot represented the lustful hearts of the Roman Empire. It was enticing, it was seductive. What do you think was so seductive about being part of the Roman Empire back then? And you've already hit on it some. This was a place where your upper class was there, I guess. You had all different classes there, you had to, but they had the best of the best there. They had things, all over the world were shipped to Rome so that they could have the best of the best. Anything you wanted in Rome, anything you wanted in life, as far as earthly things, Rome had it. It was the place to be back then, as far as earthly things go. It was very enticing and seductive. Everything that appealed to the flesh, it was there. The 7 kings, therefore, were a symbolic number representing all kings or all kingdoms, past, present, or future, that would oppose the kingdom of God. Each who would come would still be a part of the 7. So that's kind of the way I like to look at it on this. Yes, it was written to where the people of the time could understand. You're talking about Rome, but here we are, long time later, and we're not too worried about Rome being the place. You've already mentioned some other places that you could consider how Rome was back then. The places to be, everything shipped there. You had best of the best. I like to think of it as the symbolic part. There are kingdoms that have come and gone, and it continues that way. Anything that is taking away from God's kingdom, that focuses on the earthly, the seductive side of the earthly things, that's part of the 7. That's part of the whole. Since 7, that's. I'm going to read a little more of this. Although kingdoms rise up out of the upheavals of the sea and society, their anti-God rulers originate in the abyss. For each continues for a little while, then goes down into perdition, which is the end of all those who oppose God. By this, Haley's suggesting that we not necessarily have to take 7 kings to represent 7 literal kings, but the emphasis being on the number 7 and the significance of what it is to be a king, rather than try to list out 7 kings. In verse 11, the beast that was and is not is himself also an 8th. Okay, an 8th what? An 8th kingdom. Verse 12 says they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. They are going to war with the Lamb, but the Lamb is going to overcome and win. The 10 horns in verse 16 and the beast are going to hate the harlot. The pleasures of sin disappoint in the end. Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who do hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they shall be filled." When Rome falls, those people who are a part of the empire, who have built their life around the empire, hate the woman. She fell, and they are losing everything, and they hate her because they have lost it all. Those who are a part of the beast are a part of the empire. They will make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and shall burn her utterly with fire. So, what do we see in there? When Rome falls, what are all the other countries that have been feeding Rome going to do? It's just like what's that? They're going to devour Rome. They're not going to hop in there and try to save her. They're going to try to get what they can out of it. It's just like the world, what we have today. You have a few countries that will help each other out, but most of the time, since business runs everything nowadays, the greedy side of business is what I'm referring to. People are going to see how they can benefit out of it, see what they can take for their own. And it pretty much spells out in here that those who live that way are going to be burned up with Rome in that instance. And in general, like as we were thinking today, the ones that live that way, they're not looked upon very well by Christ or by God. Okay, we also have chapter 18 to go over. I'm not going to read that whole thing at once, I promise. Chapter 18, verse 1. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. For all nations have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her. And the merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living." Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Pay her back as she herself has paid back others, and repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double portion for her in the cup she mixes. As she glorified herself and lived in luxury, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, I sit as a queen, I am no widow, and mourning I shall never see. Mourning as in grieving. Burned up with the fire, for mighty is the Lord God who has judged her." Okay, let's just stop right there for a minute. So, first thing we see is John come in and he says, familiar phrase, he says, "After these things I saw." So, do you think that means there's a certain chronology to all of this, or I think from what I've read, it looks more just like he had this vision. Now, after that, I saw this vision. It doesn't really say these things are going to come in a certain order. It just says that, okay, after this, I saw this. I don't think it really puts a time frame on how things are going to fall. Okay. Yeah, he had different angels talking to him at different times, or different visions he was given. Not all of them talked to him, actually. Some of them did. But yes, he had different angels showing him different things. Do they all happen in a certain order? Is it going to play out in a certain order? It really doesn't say that it is. It's just like, okay, I saw this vision, now I'm seeing this vision. I don't think it puts a time frame on how they're going to happen. And also, my own personal thoughts on this. Agree with me or not? If you don't, speak up. This was written to where the people of that day could read it and understand it. But everything, all the symbolism in there, it still holds true for us today. It shows that as long as we're following God and His Word, and of course we're all going to stumble, but as long as we keep our eyes on Him and keep working towards Him and don't fall for the seductiveness of popularity, style, whatever you want to put in there, all the earthly things that can take your mind away from God. As long as we can keep focused the right way, we're okay. We are one of the chosen. But it is possible for us to be drawn into earthly things, the more fleshly things. So it's as true today as it is when it was written here. I don't think it's something that has a certain beginning and a certain end. Only God knows the end of Revelation. I think this is something that's playing out already. Some of it you see has already happened. Some of it, well, did it already happen, or is it something coming? We're not really sure. It depends on your interpretation. Once again, some of this is up to interpretation. So I think every bit of this still does apply to us. It's not like something that's just in the past we can read and say, oh, okay, look what they went through. Because everything in here, what else could be a kingdom that they talk about, and the immoralities that are today? We have numerous kingdoms of today. I mean, the U.S., I hope it stands a long time, and I pray that we can get God back into it. But this is a kingdom that can go either direction. Here lately, in the last few decades, it's been pulled the wrong way. But anybody, anything that is pulled that direction, there's a chance that if you go too far, if you don't turn your head back and see where you've fallen, we could all end up going the wrong direction. We could all be part of the abomination that he is talking about. Okay, I'm getting off track here. Let me get back on track. Okay, this section consists of 4 subdivisions. First, there is a dirge or lament of an angel announcing that the city has fallen. Chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. Next, there is an accompanying dirge by the kings and merchants who mourn the loss of her. How far did we read? I don't want to get ahead of myself. Let's continue reading. Okay, let's go with verse 4. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities." Okay, I've already read that part. Verse 9, okay. "And the kings of the earth, who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her, will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, 'Alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon. For in a single hour your judgment has come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, pearls, fine linen, purple cloth, silk, scarlet cloth, all kinds of scented wood, all kinds of articles of ivory, all kinds of articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gained wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels and with pearls, for in a single hour all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmasters and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off." You see a little pattern here? All the people that made money off of Rome at that time, all the people, all the other countries, all the kings, everybody. As Rome is falling, they're all standing far off. Most of the time, that's the allegiance you get whenever you're not doing something good. Even if it was considered something, wow, back in the day, all the splendor that Rome had, what really was Rome to all these other countries? It was a place to make money. It was a place to feel important, to have some self-importance. But when Rome falls, what is everybody doing at that point? They're standing far off. They're watching it happen. They're not going to get into that. Okay, let me keep going. Okay, stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of her burning. What city was like the great city? And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. For in a single hour she has been laid waste. Rejoice over her, O heaven. And you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Okay, we kind of shifted gears there, didn't we? In verse 20, what's happening there? We saw earlier where the angel called all the Christians out of there. If you're a Christian, get away from this kind of stuff. Get away from the immorality of the city of Rome. Try to, distance yourself from it. It doesn't say try to. It says come away from it. Get away from that. And we as Christians are called to be different, right? If we're seen exactly as the rest of the world, we're really not standing out. We're not a light for Christ. Same here. They were called to be different even back then. And at the point of before the city was burned down, they were. And in verse 20, all of a sudden he changes and he's talking to them. Rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. Then a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and will be found no more. Oops. And the sound of the harpist. Okay, in this next bit, since we're out of time actually, it's going over all the things that will never happen in Rome again. You'll never have harpists playing. You'll never have craftsmen building anything. The sound of the mill will never be there again. Light of the lamp will not be there. There will not be marriages, brides and bridegrooms. Merchants will not be there anymore. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and all who... And in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and all who have been slain on earth. Of course, once again, that points back to that being Rome. And once again, to them, it meant Rome. To us and to them, something that they could try to grasp on the concept is all the earthly things that Rome stood for, that's what's fallen at that point. And us as Christians need to be set apart from that. If we want our light to shine to this world and bring others to Christ, do you think it's going to happen if we're going right along with the crowd, doing everything that the world does? God's pretty clear in His Word, what He considers holy and what He considers an abomination. So we need to do our best to be as the saints back then and try to distance ourselves from the things that are not godly. That doesn't mean, condemn them ourselves. That's not our place to judge. Just make sure the world can see that we're different. We're living by a different set of rules than the world is. I think we're way out of time. I'm sorry. Are there any questions before we finish?